Hi, in this video we're going to work with an Android application and do a tutorial that will skip no steps and will create an interesting game. So you can see a preview of the game here of what we're going to learn. So some of the things you will see in this tutorial are layouts so that we can put buttons in the right places. We will create button listeners, which are programs that respond to each button click. We will create Java classes, and so there's a little bit of program design here, not just coding Android, but how do you actually format your data and manage it well in a more complicated program than your simple tutorials. Then we're going to add a timer. You can see across the top of the screen there's 23 seconds left in this game. And we'll also talk about program flows, so we can talk about the starting point of your program during the game, and then when it's over, how do you process the flow of maybe your flow chart of your actions of what you want to do. And so this video here is a compilation of several tutorials, so it's a little bit long, but it will take you through the whole steps of what you can create in an Android app.
Hi, in this video we're going to do an introduction to a new application. You can see on this Android simulator I have a program called Math Quiz. Let's see how it works, and then we'll talk about what we're going to learn as we build this app. So first of all, the big green Go button, and then you can see I have math problems at the top of the page with a timer running. So I have 24 seconds remaining. So 4 plus 0 is 4. 5 plus 0 is 5. 2 plus 4 is 6. Let's make a mistake here. 7 plus 4 is 6. You can see I have a message down at the bottom now, and I am losing points, so I've got a negative score. I gain a little bit back, and then when my time is up, I go 3, 2, 1, 0 seconds, and now it says I have 5 out of 7 with a negative 10 score, and then the button Go reappears. So that's the app that we're going to be creating. It's going to demonstrate a lot of different things. So we're going to look at, first of all, a constrained layout. And you can see we have a nice color-coded image here. We have a progress bar across the top, the little red bar that has the timer. We use the timer. We have a class called question. And so there's lots of different things that are going to be included in this tutorial. And by the time you're done, you'll have a better understanding of a lot of Android concepts. So let's get started building Math Quiz. Hi. In this video, we're going to create a layout for our Math Quiz app. So I'm going into Android Studio and I'm going to create a new project. We'll call this thing Math Quiz 2 and choose Next. I'm going to leave the Android Studio at API 14 and choose Next. We'll pick a blank activity, or empty. We'll leave main activity as it is and click Finish. And so the application will begin to build. So you can see we have our new project open. We have activity main and main activity.java. So you notice in the Android 3 that the default layout is called a constraint layout. And so we'll be working with constraints in this video. The first thing we should do is delete this text view that says Hello World, and so we have just a blank activity. Now I'm going to pull over here a design that I'm going to build. So this is a Word document with a screen capture of the final product. You can see here that I'm going to create a few buttons, and we have a layout. We have lots of different view controls. So we'll be creating all of these in the upcoming minutes here. So to get started, I'm going to put a new button on the center of the screen. And so it's just a gray button. This will eventually become the start button. Notice we have a warning that says this view is not constrained. It will jump to the corner 0, 0 at runtime unless you add the constraints. So this is telling you that constraints are important in how you set this up. So that's a big point of the video that we're doing here. Let's see how these constraints work. If I were to run this program now, you would see exactly as the warning tells us that the button jumps to the top left corner, which is 0, 0 on the grid. So let's go back into our design view. I'm going to click in the top center where the little anchors are, and as you drag out, you notice you get a green arrow. That is a constraint. So if I drag it all the way to the top edge, the button will jump to the top. So it is constrained to stick to the top edge of the layout. I'm going to grab the same button in the bottom center of the of the object and drag to the other end. And so now we have corresponding constraints. So it's like two slinkies that are pulling equally on this button. And it ends up being in the center of the screen. And so that's how you center an object, is you put a constraint to the left and to the right, or to the top and the bottom. So let's do a constraint to the right, and then pull an equally opposing constraint to the other side. And so now, with 4 different constraints, all pulling in opposite directions, the button ends up in the center of the screen. Let's go check out the text view to see what that looks like. So you can see we have a button object now in our XML file. And if we look down at the bottom of the item, we can see that there are 4 constraints. So they are labeled as constraint bottom, and then we have a constraint start and end, and then another one constraint top. So you can see that it's labeled there to say that the items are being pulled in those 4 different directions. They're all being pulled toward the edge of the parent. So the top, the bottom, the left, and the right. The parent is the enclosing activity edges. So let's switch back into the design view now. Let's run the program again this time, and let's see what happens now that we have 4 constraints. So the button should move from the top left, and it should be in the center of the screen, and it certainly looks like it is. Okay, select the button again. Now over on the right side, you can see all of the properties of this button. Now I'm going to scroll to the bottom, and I want to simplify this view. So there is an item called View Fewer Attributes. And now you have a little grid that shows a graphical view of what these constraints are. So you can see the width of the item, you can see the margins around the edge of it, and some other properties as well. I'm going to set the top margin here from 8, and let's change it to something else. Let's go bigger, like 32. And you notice now that the item is being dragged closer to the bottom. Let's bump it up to a big number, like 100. And you can see that the margin is set toward the top, and then the leftover space is split between the constraints. Let's change it back to 0. As a matter of fact, I'm going to set the margin on all of these to 0. There's really no need to have a margin when we're already pulling everything to the center of the screen. Let's bring back the design plan that I have in mind. So we have this Go button that's supposed to be in the center of the screen. What else can we do with it? Let's go check out some of the properties here. So first of all, the text. We can change it to the word Go. Let's go look at the background. We can select a color here. So if we click the ellipsis and then choose the color category, we should be able to choose something here. So I'm going to pick a green color. Let's play around with the height. So if we were to select this again and look at the layout width and height, right now it's set to wrap content, which will be just large enough to hold the word Go. You can also change that by these little chevron symbols, and it'll add a actual number of dp. So density pixels is what dp stands for. Let's push it up to 180 and see what that looks like. So 180 by 180, and we should have a square button. Let's go check out text appearance. Text appearance allows you to change things like the text color. So if I want my text color to be white, I will browse and find a white color and choose OK. So Go is white. We could also make the text bold. Can we change the size? It looks like we can. We can put the size up to something larger so it looks big and easy to read. Okay, let's go back and look at our design again. We're going to put a few more things on this page. These text items up at the top are called text views. And so those are controls that we'll put in there. So we need 3 text views. And it looks like we also have a other item called a progress bar. So the progress bar is going to be used as our game timer, and it will show how much time has elapsed. So we're going to spread these text views out evenly, and let's see how that works now. So the first thing I want to do is go look for the control called the progress bar. So widgets, and progress bar horizontal seems to be the one that matches. So let's drag him into our layout. And we need to set the constraints for him as well. So the same warning appears that says, hey, you have no constraints on this thing. So once more, I'm going to drag the edges to the left and to the right. So we have opposing constraints, so it's centered. Let's go check out to see what the text view says for our XML file. And you can see that it says we've got our constraints here for the end matches the parent and the start matches the parent. I'm going to add another constraint here. I'm going to type in layout underscore constraint, and I want to choose the one that says the top will match the top of the parent. So it's a little hard to drag those arrows sometimes. It's easier to edit the XML file directly. So now it should be stuck to the top of the screen and centered. Now let's change the width. Right now it's set to match content. I want to match the parent, so that way it fills the entire width of the page. The progress is the value of how much time has elapsed. I'll just put in 45 for right now, and that will give us a little red line to see what it's supposed to look like during the game. I'm going to select the text view item and drag him in near the top left corner. Remember, it doesn't stay here until we put the constraints on it. So let's do a few property modifications on this text view. First of all, I'd like to see the size of the text a little larger, so let's set it to 24. And now we can see what we're doing a little better. So we'll put a left constraint on and a top constraint. Now I want this top constraint to touch the progress bar, not the edge of the screen. So I'm not sure if I'm getting that or not. It's really hard to see it at times. So I think that's the best I can do. Let's go check out the text editor and look at the XML file. What happened here? So it says here that the constraint, the top of my item is to the top of the parent. I didn't get the one I wanted, so let's delete that and let's manually type in the constraint. So I'm going to type in top and search for the top is matching the bottom of another object. And the object I want is the progress bar. So the top of the text view matches the bottom of the progress bar. And you can see this curved line now is showing me the constraint relationship here. So it is touching the progress bar. Now the margins. I don't need margins again here, so I'm going to change those from 8 to 0. And so that'll get up close to the top as possible. Now it's time for another text view. So maybe you can put one in the upper right corner. Go ahead and try to squeeze it in here. I'll show you how I'm going to do it. Let's drag a new one out, and I'll go through the same process. So let's change his text size so that way we can read the text easier. And then I'll put the constraints on it. So the right constraint goes first, so we drag to the right edge of the screen. The top constraint I want to match with the progress bar. So carefully see if I can get that to touch. Doesn't look like it's working. So let's go into the text editor again and see what the top constraint is. So it's set it to something called an absolute Y value. I don't want absolute Y values. They're not relative to anything, and they don't work on different size screens. So let's get rid of that and manually type in the constraint. So I'm going to type in layout and look for the one that says top of the item to the bottom of another item. And I want to set it to the bottom of the progress bar. Now we need to go to the center. Let's put another text view item in the middle. Let's change his font size again, make it large. And now I'm going to set the constraints. So I'm going to take the left and join it to the right side of the first text view. Let's see if that worked. So it says the start goes to the end of the first text view. So that seems to work. Let's drag the other way. So let's make a constraint so that the right side matches the start of the third text view. Okay, so now the top. Let's see if we can get that to work like we want. So I'm going to drag the top constraint up to the taskbar, up to the progress bar. And it seems to be not quite right. It wanted to go to the top of the bar. So let's delete that and retype it again manually. So I want the top of this control to match the bottom of the progress bar. So let's see. Top matches the bottom of. That's the one I want. And then I want progress bar. Well, it looks like I have an extra text here, so delete that and away we go. And let's look at the design. Seems to fit. Now how about the top margin? We probably need to get that out of there, so let's go to 0 for the top margin. And I think we've got ourselves a working layout. This is pretty much like I want it, so let's run it and test it out and see how far we've gotten in our layout. So as I look at the preview of the app, it looks like everything's in place where I wanted it. So pretty good progress here. So maybe that's a good point to end this video, and we'll continue on in the next one. Hi, welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you a little bit more about the constrained layout and some of the items we're trying to create for a game. So what we did last video was we set a button in the center of the screen, 3 text views that were near the top, and hiding between the text view and the edge of the screen was this progress bar. So as you can see in my component tree, I don't have any custom names for my items, so I'm going to change those now. So let's go into button start and click at the top here and give them a name. The second one, which is actually on the right side, is going to be for the text view score. So TV score. The third one, which is the center, we're going to call him TV, and this is where we're going to display the questions. So we'll call him text view underscore questions. So now you can see that we have new names in all of our components. If we were going to the text view, we would see now that the ID name is now progress timer, TV timer, TV score. So TV does not stand for television, it stands for text view. And then the other one is TV questions. So now the next step is I'm going to put in a grid where I can put in 4 buttons. So if I were to go into the layout section, you can see that I have a table layout. And you're wondering where the grid is. Well, there is a grid view in the legacy section. So I could use grid view, but it seems like they want us to use table view now with the newest version of Android Studio. So let's put a table view into here. So we drag it in, and now I want the table view to be beneath these 4 text buttons and about square. So let's do the first of all the constraints. So I'm going to drag this to the left side, and then I'm going to drag the other to the right side. And the top view should touch the text view. So let's see if I can get that right. Doesn't look like I got it right. So let's go into the text editor and see what happens. So we got this table layout. The constraint, let's see what we got here. End to the end of the parent. Start to the start of the parent. Good. Now the top is to the bottom of TV questions. Well, amazing. I got it right. So those are the constraints for setting his height, or the top and the left and the right. Let's go to the actual layout width. Let's make that match the parent, so match constraints. And the height, I'm going to actually put in 400 dp. And now we have ourselves pretty much a square. It's not going to be always square, but we'll have 400 for the top and the bottom height. Now for the rows, I'm going to have 2 rows of buttons. So I can take these last 2 and delete them and insert some buttons into row 1 and into row 2. So let's go into the buttons area, and I'm going to drag in a button. Now I could put the button here, and you can see that it doesn't actually fall into the place I wanted it to. So I'm going to drag this up into the table row. The second button I'm going to add to this, I'm going to just drop it into the table row. And so now you can see I have 2 buttons in this row. Now I want to spread them across so that they are filling the whole screen. So let's try a few things. Let's go to layout weight, or layout something. Yeah, layout weight. So relative to the other items in my row, how much is this going to count? I'm just going to assign them in equal numbers. So this one gets a 1. The other button gets a layout weight of 1. And so they balance each other out now. Let's try the height. There is a height button. So I'm making my grid 200 pixels high, wasn't it? No, it's 400. So I'm going to set this to 200, which is half. And so now we have two buttons side by side. Let's add two more for the other row. So we'll drag this to the table row. And now I have buttons 6 and 7. Let's do the same process here. So these are going to be the answers to the quiz. So let's rename these buttons so that they can be programmed in Java later. So for button 5, I'm going to rename him as BTN, and we'll call it Answer 0. So I've renamed them all as Answer 0, 1, 2, and 3. Now finally, at the bottom of my screen, I want to have a message box so I can tell the user if he got a right answer or tell him a good score. So that would be another text view. So let's take a text view item and drop it here. This time I want to have the text view anchored to the bottom and to the left and to the right. So let's also change his text size so we can see it nicely. Let's check the text and find out if this was indeed what I intended. So the text view has been constrained to the bottom of the parent, the end to the end of the parent, and start to the start of the parent. So that looks pretty good. Now in the original design of my program, I had a nice color scheme. Where did I get these colors? Let's take a look at some artistic help. I've got a website called Flat UI Colors. Let's take a look through here. You can see that they have a whole bunch of palettes of colors that they think are nice. So I'm looking for something in this little bit muted range. Let's go into the German palette and see what we can do there. So if I wanted to use these 4 different hues of bluish green, I could just say copy this, and it told me that I copied a text hexadecimal code. So let's go into the button color here and see if we can use that. So where was the background color? I'm going to paste in that value that I pressed. Oh, now I have a nice blue color. Let's switch back and do the next one. So I'm going to copy, and let's go into the next button and tell it that background color. So now I have 4 colors that blend quite nicely together. Now my green looks a little bit ugly, so let's go back and pick a color for our Go button. It's difficult. Why can't I paste my green Go button? I could always just come over to here and click it, and then I can come back into the colors. And so now I have 4 colors plus a green, and I'll trust the artist to make sure that those were what they thought blended well together. Lastly, I want to change the text of everything to white on these buttons, and this looks like I have my layout pretty well set up and ready to run. So in the next video, let's go through and wire some of these buttons up to some code and see if we can create a game.
Hi, welcome to another video in our quiz app program. In this program, or in this video, we're going to do a class. We're going to create a class that will generate questions for our multiple choice format. So I'd like you to go with me into your project that you've started here and look in the app folder, look inside of Java, and then the first folder which has the main activity hiding in it. In here we're going to create a new class called question, and we'll build up an ability to choose 4 different random questions and pick one correct answer. So let's get started here. I'm going to right click and choose new Java class, and we'll call this thing question and click OK. All right, we're ready to start here on the coding.
So each question is going to be an addition problem. So I'm going to simply have properties that say first number, which is an integer, second number is an integer, and the third one will be the answer. So next I'm going to create some false answers. So there will be 4 choices that the user will be able to pick from. And I will store those in what's called the answer array. So one of those 4 will be correct. And so the answer position will be a number from 0 to 3. So as I generate questions, I'm going to provide an upper limit. So this is sort of the difficulty level. Apparently adding larger numbers is more difficult. So I'd also like to have a string which we can put out to the screen. So for instance, if the first number were 4, the second number were 9, then the question phrase would be 4 plus 9 equals. And so it's just a string of what the problem is. So now since we have all these, I'm going to generate the actual getters and setters. So let's go to right click and generate. And if we have getters and setters, we can choose a shift and select all of these and click OK. And so we've generated all the getters and setters automatically. So now I'm going to create a constructor. And the constructor will generate a new question. So it will take 2 random numbers, add them together, calculate the answer, and it will also generate 4 false questions and put those in the buttons to choose from. So we're going to need a random number generator to create a new problem. Notice we have to import. So I think it is Option Enter. And now it's imported, and you should see at the first of the page we have Java Utility Random. So now we'll generate our question. We'll use a first number is going to be a random number between 0 and the upper limit, and the second number is also a new random number. And of course the answer is add them together. So now I want to know where the answer position will be. So remember we have 4 possible places, 0, 1, 2, and 3, and I'm randomly choosing one of those 4. So next, let's create the answer array. And I'll just initialize it first of all as an array of numbers. So 0, 1, 2, and 3 are just random numbers. But now I'm going to recalculate those answers. So now I'm going to generate 4 random numbers. And I'm going to try to do an answer that could possibly be close to what the user would think. So a one-off answer, plus 10 answer, a -5, and a -2. Now I would like to shuffle these 4 answers so that they're not always in the same position. So I'm going to invent a method here, or a new function called shuffle array. So here's the start of my new custom method. It'll be called shuffle array. It will return an integer array, and it will also accept an integer array. So next I'm going to create a for loop that will run backwards. So it's going to count from the array length down to 0, counting down by 1. So the rest of this code is we are going to take a random position and swap it with a temporary number. So we're just trading places inside of the array. So this creates a shuffle array program. Okay, it looks like I spelled shuffle array incorrectly, so now we're ready to go. So shuffle array should be able to mix up our answers. Right, let's return back into our question constructor, and lastly, after I shuffle the array, I'm going to place the correct answer in one of the places. So we'll stop with the video here, and then we'll start coding in the actual main activity in the next video. Hi, welcome to another video for our Math Quiz app. In this video, we're going to start coding in the main activity area. So the goal here is to set up click listeners on all of the buttons and create a actual variable in the Java class so that it can talk to the ID that's in the layout. So the first thing I want to do is make sure that all of my buttons and objects have a specific ID. So text layout looks like text view number 4 could be changed. I forgot to do that earlier. So let's call this TV bottom message. How about? And we're ready to go. So we're going to connect all of these buttons and text views. So I'm going to create a button object, and also I'm going to have another class item called text view. So all of these values come right out of the main activity XML. Okay, it looks like I've got all of my buttons, text views, and progress bar items all defined as a variable. Okay, so now I'm going to define the buttons. I'm going to use button start and define it by looking for the view by ID, r.id btn start. And so the others are the same. So answer 0 is found with answer 0 and 1 and 2 and 3 and so on. So next I will define all of the text view variables. So we should have score and then bottom message, and we'll go with questions and TV timer. And each of these will do find view by ID. Next I'm going to set the initial text for each of the text views. So for the timer I want to say 0 seconds. For questions I'll leave it blank. For the bottom message I'll say press go. And for the score I will say 0 points. Let's see, I'm looking over the list of everything that I've defined here, and it looks like I've forgotten the progress bar. So let's put in that as well. Progress timer, and we'll put him in. Now it would be a good idea to test to see if this thing actually works and if I haven't created any errors. So I'm going to press the green run button, and let's choose an emulator and run the program. So once the program is launched, you should see that all of the buttons, or the TVs, the text views, are set to what I expected. So 0 seconds, 0 points, and press go. We're ready to start programming the buttons. So let's do that in the next video. We'll set up some actions and set up some questions. Hey, welcome to another video. In the continuing process here of our math quiz app, I'm going to now create the button listeners for each of our buttons on our app. So let's start with the start button. So let's see, what do we got? Button start. And let's do a set on click listener. And now I am looking for something in between these parentheses, right? So in the past, many of the examples went like this. We type in new, and then we type in click listener. And I choose the option there, and it creates a whole bunch of code. So what I'd like to do, instead of putting the code inside of each button, we're going to share click listeners. So let me show you what you can do. You can separate the click listener idea and just cut him out of here. So I'm going to cut this. All right, so you can see that I have taken this code and removed it from where I've normally placed it between the parentheses. So what I'd like to do is to create a click listener variable and assign it to whatever this thing is. So let's type in the usual view and on click listener and give it a name. Let's call it start button click listener. So now this variable here we can copy and paste in down here. This is the exact same function, and you're going to ask, why would we separate these out? Well, I'm going to show you this because in the next buttons, which are the answer buttons, we want to share one click listener among all the 4 buttons. So I'm just giving this as an example of how to split these in 2 pieces. So what happens when I click the start button? Well, first of all, I want the start button to disappear. So the first thing I have to do is figure out which item on the screen was sent here. So it's pretty obvious as the human to say, well, there's only one click listener and there's one button, so they must go together. But of course the computer doesn't think that smartly. So we need to actually put in a variable here, and we'll call it another start button. And so this item here is going to become equal to v. So v is this parameter that was passed in here. The variable v is a view. So this is telling us what button on the screen sent the message here for the click. And it's telling us in the error on the compiler that says, hey, you're trying to take a view object and you're assigning it to a button variable. Can you do that? Well, button is a descendant from view. So view is the superclass or the abstract class, and button is one of those inherited classes. So since it is an inherited thing, you're supposed to be able to cast this. So if you put in the word button in parentheses, it's going to tell the computer that, hey, this view, I guarantee you, is coming from a button. I won't send you a click from any other object, like a click from a text edit or a progress bar. It's just coming from buttons. So you have to believe me. It's a cast. So now I have this start button variable. I'm going to do something with start button. I'm going to do set visibility to invisible. So I could put in the word false, and that would work. However, there's a more appropriate way. You type in view, and then you type these constant variables. So invisible is the setting I'm looking for. Now, as soon as we press go, I want to also kick off another function. So let's create a function called start game. And then later on, we're going to have to be able to program that. So down here, I'm going to have a private void start game. And then from there, we're going to pick up the gameplay. Game, there'll be several options that we have to get going. So we'll have to generate a new question. We'll set the text on the answer buttons. We'll enable those buttons, and then we'll start the timer. So start game will begin and do all these things at once. So let's save that for the next video. So in the next video, we'll do the start game method. So we'll create the questions and set the text on the buttons and start the timer. So that's coming up soon. Hi, in this video we're going to continue working with our Math Quiz app, and we're going to create another Java class here. We're going to create the Java class called Game, which will manage the score and keep track of questions, and it'll just prevent us from putting too much logic code into our GUI, our graphical user interface. And so let's get started with making a game which will manage questions. So I'm going into my Java folder and looking for the area where my classes are, and I'm going to just call it Game. So the first thing I need to do is think about the properties of a game class. We're going to have a list of questions, so let's create a private list of type question. Looks like we need to do the import on this thing. So for the rest of the properties, let's come up with 3 integers. It'll keep track of our score, number of correct, number of incorrect, and total questions. And then we'll also have a calculated number called score. And also I would like to keep track of what the current question is that's being displayed on the screen. So now let's build a constructor. So for the constructor, we'll just set all of the defaults. I think 0 seems to make sense. There's no questions, there's no totals, there's no score. And we will set a current question, will be a brand new question, and I'll just pick as an upper limit for 10 for the range. So let's make a function called make new questions, and this will generate a new question and assign it to the current question. So when I generate a new question, I'm going to automatically increase the difficulty level. So the formula will be total number of questions that have been created. I'll double that, and I'll just add 5. So you could have a slightly different formula here, but this one seems to work. Then we'll do a ++ on the total questions, and then add the current question to our questions list. So I'll create a function that is for checking answers. It will accept a submitted answer. So this means that when the game is being played, we'll put in an answer to check to see if it's right or not. So I'll set a Boolean as a flag, is correct. And then the if statement will be if the current answer, or get the answer from the current question, is equal to the answer that was submitted, then that's obviously correct. So we'll set the number of correct to ++, and we'll return the is correct to be true. And of course, if that's not true, then we'll do the opposite. We'll do the number of incorrect answers ++, and we'll set the flag is correct. We'll set that to false. Then we can recalculate the score, since we know now if they have 1 more or 1 less correct, and then return finally the value for our Boolean return value. So that's check answer. So that pretty much defines our function. The last thing I want to do is make sure that there are getters and setters for all of these properties. So all of these privates here, let's do a generate and see if we can put getters and setters in there. So select all of them. I'm holding the Shift key and selecting everybody, and let's choose OK. And so you can see we have getters and setters. Now generally, I like to put these at the bottom of the screen, so I am going to cut these out and put them at the bottom of the function since they're kind of assumed to be there. Okay, so there's our game function. The reason why we did that coding this way is because I don't want to pollute my main activity Well, all of this code, so checking answers and keeping track of score. Something else occurred to me as I was looking through my question class from a few videos ago. The question class has several properties here that need to be handled. We've got all the properties at the top, but the question phrase. The question phrase is supposed to be a string value like 4 plus 9 equals, and I never calculated that when I do a constructor, so I'm going to fix that now. So right after this line here, we have a new answer calculated. We could also say that this dot question phrase is going to be equal to the string. So we'll say first number plus, and then I'm going to use a string with a plus sign in it. And then the other plus sign is for the second number. And then we'll add on the last equal sign. So that's our get question phrase. Now I think we have a getter down at the bottom. So get question phrase and set question phrase are there, but we've actually just calculated it now with this line. So that will avoid some problems in the future. Hi, welcome back to another video for our quiz game for math. I'm going to now complete some work here in the main activity. So last time we were looking at main activity, we created a button lister for the start, but we haven't done anything else. So one of the lessons that I was promising that we would do is to show you why we would split up the on-click listener from the actual event called set on-click listener. It seemed to be kind of strange when you only have one button, but we're going to now complete 4 buttons with the same listener, and so you'll see how that works. So let's start by saying that we have button 0, and I want to do a set on click listener. So we're going to use 4 buttons that all share the same click listener. So I'm going to paste in number 1, 2, 3, and 0, 1, 2, and 3. So what should the click listener be here? Now it would be kind of redundant if we had to create 4 different click listeners that were identical. And so we're going to share one. So I'm going to call this thing the answer button click listener. Let's see, I'm going to use camel case, button click. So I want to use this same function for 4 different buttons. So I'm going to copy and paste. Now you can see that the red text says there is no such thing as this answer button click listener. So I'm going to do the same process that I did here for the start button. I'm going to create a new one. We've got one function that will be handled by all the buttons. So I want to capture the button that was clicked. And so I have this view variable. It's called v. And just like before, it says you're trying to assign one class type to another. It says I'm required to cast this thing as a button because that's what you declared it to be. And I found a view. So remember, in the categories of inheritance of Android, view is the top of the tree. So every control is a view. And so button can be one of the views. So it is legal to say expect that v is a button. And so now we've got ourselves a new button variable. So now I want to find out what answer was clicked. So I'm going to create an integer and say answer selected. I'm going to get this from the value of the button. What I'd like to do is assign selected answer or answer selected to be equal to the text that was displayed on the button. So this doesn't quite work. Let's go see why. It says here you're trying to assign a character sequence into an integer variable. So we have to translate this text into an integer. So you can see that if I type in integer dot, there is a method called parseInt. So let's try that. ParseInt, and I'll put that around the string here. It still doesn't work. What's wrong? I thought parseInt was what I wanted. Now it says you cannot use string and character sequence. They're not exactly the same thing. So I have to go to getText and type in dot to string. And so now I'm converting a string, or let's see, it starts with a character sequence, converted to a string, converted to an integer, assigned to the integer. And so there is a long process, but I now know what answer that the user clicked on. Okay, so we're going to pause here and do some coding in another place and then come back here. So what I want to do next is work on this part called start game. Actually, I think a better name for this instead of start game should be called next turn. So we're going to run this program every time we have a new turn. So I'll have to rename here on line 50 and then also on line 78. Now I've created this game class here, and I want to use this game class as the way to keep track of all my answers. So at the very top of my main activity, I'm going to import a new game. So let's call it G. How about G equals a new game? All right, so now G has the ability to generate new questions and keep track of the score. So let's go back down to here where next turn comes up. So I've got G, so let's say G dot, and what can we do with all of our nice features there? Let's try, is it generate next question or make, there it is, make new question. So as soon as we call that function, we'll have a new question. So now after we've got a new question, we can type G dot, let's see, get current question. And then what else can we do? We can get these things like the get the answer array and get the answer. That's pretty handy. So I'm going to choose get answer array. And now I want to assign those answers into the buttons that are on the screen. So since this is an array, let's create a new array here and call it integers. And we'll call it answers, how about? So this seems like it might work. If I say button underscore answer 0, and I want to set the text, and I want to set the text to whatever the first option is, the first choice, answer 0. This will probably look good, but it will actually cause the program to crash because answer is a integer and set text only takes strings. So if I were to leave this here, you would see no errors, but then it would crash on runtime. So we need to convert this into a string. So there is the function called integer.toString, and then inside of there we have answer 0. Okay, so I'm going to repeat this process and copy it for the others. I want to update something else. I want to say the TV bottom, let's see, TV questions is what I want. Let's do set text there. And I want to set it to the string, which was g.getCurrentQuestion. And then the other, which was called getQuestionPhrase. How about that? And so that will set the picture at the, or set the question at the top middle of the activity. Let's also check to see if these buttons are actually enabled. I'm going to disable these things later, and so we'll just make sure that they're enabled before we start playing the game. So set enabled to true for all of these. Now, the rest of the code here we're going to finish up in the next video. I want to check to see if the answer was actually correct, and then we'll update the score and we'll go on from there. But this video is getting a little long, so let's pause and I'll see you in the next video. Hi, we're in the middle of doing some coding, but it's a good idea to check to see if we've got any errors in our code before we continue. So in the previous video, we created this next turn function that is supposed to make a new question and set all the button labels so that we can see what the choices are. And then we'll have to finish the game where we can check to see if they click the right button. But first of all, let's see if it works. So I'm going to click the run button and choose my emulator. And so it appears like the app launches correctly. And then I press the go button and it just crashed. Oh no. So I must confess that I stopped the video and did some investigations to see what went wrong. So I traced it back and I thought, there's something in here. And I commented out certain things. I commented out these to see if they were broken. And then I finally narrowed it down to this line here. If I kept this line in, it kept crashing. So what is going on with make new question? Let's go into question and game. So make new question is right here. Looks pretty simple. All we're doing is adding something, and then this one here brought my attention. I thought questions.add. I've seen this before. This is called a null array list, and it's a common error. What happened is I created the questions array up here, and then I never defined it to anything. So I could have said this equals a new array list, and that would be correct. That would work great. And another place that I could put that in would be probably better is down here in the constructor where it's got the, when we create a new game. So I'm going to say that questions equals a new array list. And it is probably good to put it in there. What type it is type of question. So I think that's going to work now. Let's run the game again and see if this doesn't crash. So here's the app. We're up and running. I click go, and it shows me the first few questions. So I've got answers. I don't know what the correct answer is. The buttons don't do anything. So that's what we're supposed to complete here in this video. Now let's go back up to here in the button listener. So we have these 4 buttons. These are the answer buttons, and they have an answer button listener up here. And so far nothing's happening. Now we need to check to see if we got the right answer. If we do, then we'll give some points and all the rest of that. So we have the selected answer. Let's check to see if that's actually working. So a good way to test something is to do a toast. And I'm just going to see if we got the correct answer. So answer selected equals, and then we'll put in here the word answer selected. So that will show a little message on the screen when I click a button. So let's click OK and run the app. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to click the go button. And now when I click the 11, you see down here at the bottom it says answer selected. And it does show that it is interpreting the click correctly. Okay, good. I can come back here and delete that toast line. I know that it's running correctly. So I have a selected answer, so I'm going to type G dot. And let's see, we've got ourselves check answer. And the answer submitted is called answer selected. So there's a lot of code that goes on behind checked answer. It's going to update the score and everything. So after the checked answer, we should be able to update our text fields. So we have something called our score. So that would be TV underscore score. And we'll set the text. And we'll go G dot. Is there a get score? There it is. Okay, so get score, I believe, is an integer. So we're going to have to cast that into a string. So let's see, integer to string. So let's see if that works. I'm going to run the program again. Okay, here we go. We're going to run, choose go. 0 plus 1. Let's try a 1. And sure enough, I got a plus 10. If I keep clicking this, I keep getting points. So it's a nice way to win the game. What happens if I click a different one? It takes off 30 points, so it appears like it's correct in its scoring. However, I'd like the game to advance, so let's come back into the code. Simply, all we need to do then is come down to here and type in next turn, and this function will be repeated. So it will get a new question, it will set all the enabling and reassign the buttons. So that should be updated now. Okay, so here we go. We're going to test it again. So now 0 plus 0 is 0. I got 10. 1 plus 4 is 5. Look at there, I'm making points. So 5 plus 9 looks like 14. So I'd like to do one more thing. I'd like to update the press go message at the bottom of the screen. And we could do that simply by... We can simply do that down in next turn. So let's come down to here and do the TV bottom message. Set the text. And let's give it a score. Let's type G dot number correct, and we'll put in a slash symbol, and then we'll put in the number of total. So G dot get total questions. So I think this might be off by 1, but we'll try it out. So let's click go. So down here it says we're on question 0 out of 1. So it's not quite accurate. Let's try it though. 1. Now it says you're 1 out of 2. Let's try an 8. And let's see, that's 2 out of 3. So it's like 1 off for the total number of questions. So let's add 1 or subtract 1 from this score, and then it should be equal, or it should be normal. Let's see. So I'm going to subtract 1. And it looks like I need to put everything in parentheses, so that way it computes this. And let's rerun the program. Okay, one more test here. So we got 3 plus 0 is 3. There it says I got 1 out of 1. 1 plus 6 is 7. 3 plus 5 is 8. 3 plus 6 is 9. Okay, we're going to miss one. 2 plus 0 is negative 3. So sure enough, I have 4 out of 5. And the score went down to 10. So this seems to be working. You notice there's no timer, so it says 0 seconds the whole time. And the little progress bar at the top is supposed to show how many seconds have elapsed. And we're almost done. We'll put those two things in, and the game's pretty much finished. We got maybe 2 videos left, and then we've got a complete app. So see you soon. Hi, welcome back to another video for our math quiz app. We're almost finished here. We have our program running, we have a quiz, we have a score, we need a timer now. And so that's what we'll do in our video here, is to create a timer which will show the number of seconds up in the corner and also update the progress bar as the time ticks down. So let's get started with timers. So the code that we're going to work with is going to be near the top of the screen. So go find the area that says create a new game object called G, and we'll create a new object right after that. So the object that we're trying to create now is called a countdown timer. So type in countdown timer and let's call it timer equals a new countdown timer. And Android should automatically give you 2 new methods called onTick and onFinish. And that way we can have an event that happens every time the clock ticks and events that happen when the timer expires. Countdown timer has a space for 2 parameters. As you hover over it, you can see it is expecting 2 longs. So we can have decimals or integers. I'm going to put in the first is 30,000. So 30,000 is 30,000 milliseconds. So that means the entire timer countdown will be 30 seconds. Each tick is going to be 1,000 milliseconds. So that's 1 second. So now the timer is set up. And as soon as we tell the timer to start, it will do what it's supposed to every 1 second. And then after it's done with 30 seconds, it'll run this method. So I'm going to create a new variable and count the seconds as called seconds remaining. So seconds remaining will tell us how many seconds are left in our timer, and we can use that to update our progress bar. So we want to update 3 things in onTick. The first is we'll take off 1 second from the seconds remaining, and then I'm going to print the seconds remaining on the timer text view. And then for the progress timer, we use the method called setProgress, which will simply set the thermometer level of your progress. And I'm not going to just use seconds remaining, but have the full length of the time, 30, minus seconds remaining. So it's a countdown. I'm also going to put the letters SEC after the seconds remaining so people understand that it's the time. All right, so now for the finish function. So when the timer expires and all 30 seconds are gone, let's first of all disable the buttons. So answer 0, 1, 2, and 3 should be set to false for set enabled. And then I'd like to update a message at the bottom of the screen that tells the user the time is up. And also I will attach the score that they got, which was the number of correct, and that's over the number of total questions. And remember, I have to have a -1 because total questions was off by 1. Don't forget to put in a semicolon after the function here of the countdown timer. So let's see if this program will work. I'm going to build it and run it on my phone. So I choose Go, and now I should have a timer started. But it doesn't seem to be working. I've got the timer defined, but why doesn't it actually show up? Well, I probably forgot to actually start the timer. So let's go back into the code. So a good place to start the timer would be when we push the start button. So right here in this section on line 71 is the area where I hid the start button and chose next turn. So let's choose this. Let's do timer dot, and sure enough, there's a method called start. Okay, let's try that again. I'll run the code and see if we can start the timer. All right, so let's click the go button, and sure enough, I see 28 seconds going and the timer is ticking down. So it looks like we're in business, and it should stop at the end. Okay, you can see that the time is up, and if I try to do any more work, I can't click any of these buttons anymore. It looks like they've all been disabled. So the timer seems to work. Now your timer actually might need a little bit of adjustment. So let's go back into our main activity and let's select the properties. I think I probably need to show you that I changed something here. I changed the maximum value of the timer to 30 and the progress I set to be default to 20. So I think you might see that needs to be changed in yours. Okay, not bad. We've got a timer working. We have one more thing to do. Is when we're done, it would be a good time to delay for a little while and then show the start button again so we can play another game. Because right now it's at a dead end. Okay, so the goal now is to have this green button reappear at the end of the game. So let's give it a time of lapse, maybe 3 or 4 seconds, to see that the user can see the score, and then we'll push the go button and restart. So let's look up some information on how we can do a delayed action event. So it's a little complicated. If you were to just freeze your app and then tell it to do a for loop for 4 seconds, it would completely freeze your operating system. So what we're looking for is something else called a handler. And it says here in this tutorial that handlers are used to execute a runnable task on the UI thread after an optional delay. Now what are they talking about? First of all, a runnable task, well, that's obvious, it just runs. But what is the UI thread? And so the UI thread is a conceptual idea right here, is that there is a continual flow of messages that come through the operating system, and it is used for multitasking. So it gives a little time slice to each app, as most operating systems do. That's the UI thread. And so what we want to do is put in a message that says, hey, we're going to do something in another 4 seconds, and so put it into the queue. So here is some code. How to execute an event after a delay. So we're going to create something called a handler. We're also going to create some code called runnable, and you can name this anything you want. And then inside there, they just print something out to their console app. So we're going to actually hide the button and restart the game. But this is the idea of what we're going to create. And then finally, post delayed. So something like that. So let's go up into our timer area. So I'm back into line 25 to 42. And we want to put a message inside of onFinish. So let's create some space after the time is up message. So we're going to create a handler. Now I'm going to use the word final because we don't want to have multiple handlers going on. So we'll call this thing handler. And we'll make a new handler. So you can see that handler.postDelayed gives us some options. So we can create a runnable function and then give it a second number, which is how many milliseconds this will happen after it's delayed. So let's put in our 2 numbers. So in the parameters here, post delayed, we're looking for a runnable object. Let's see if we can make one. New runnable. And sure enough, there is a new runnable. And there is the runnable object. And then we can do something in there. So let's say button start dot set visible. And set visibility. Remember that was view dot visible. There it is. So that's our first parameter. And you can see that we need to have something else. We need to have a comma here. And how long is it going to last? Let's say we'll do a delay of 4,000 milliseconds. So it looks like all of the code now is nicely formatted again. So I'll run my app and play a game. Okay, let's start the game and continue playing here. All right, so it says time is up. And now, as you can see, the 4-second delay, and I push go, and away we go again. However, it looks like I need to reset the timer not only for the end of the game, but you can see the number of seconds is now into the negative. So I need to do some more than just reset this. So let's go down into the start button, and let's see if we can adjust a few things there. So let's reset the number of seconds remaining to 30, and let's also create a new version of our G, which is game. So that way it restarts. And we'll go and try to run the game again. So this is the first time through. Everything is normal. Time is up, it says. Now I press go, and the new game starts. We've got the 0 score, and it looks like the timer is working. So I think we're about done. Now the last few things that you might want to finish up, you can adjust, of course, the colors. And how about the font size on these buttons? That's pretty small. It would be nice. And instead of 20, why not say the word 20 PTS for 20 points? So that way the user doesn't get confused and think that it's some answer to this problem here. So there's the main program. We got it going. You've learned a lot about arranging things with a constraint layout. We've worked with some Java classes. We've worked with a timer and a progress bar. So hopefully some good programming techniques that you've picked up and can use in your further project.
My name is Shad Sluter and I teach here at Grand Canyon University. So if you're interested in what you see here, you can check out our programs. We have computer science, we have computer programming, which is part of what you're seeing right now with this Android tutorial, information technology degrees, so you can figure out how to run networks and servers. We also emphasize cybersecurity, so you can be a penetration tester or you can work with encryption and other issues with cybersecurity. We also have an entire school devoted to engineering, so different degrees such as electrical, mechanical, and biomedical, and emphasis in robotics in our regular engineering degree. So there's a lot of technology going on here at Grand Canyon University. If you specifically like what you see here with the Android tutorial, then what you should be interested in is our computer programming degree. So in the degree with computer programming, you're going to become a full-stack developer, learning the entire software development process. We cover several languages. So you'll take like 5 courses in Java programming. So one of them would be Android. You would also learn Java Enterprise and Spring. So you'd be able to create simple apps all the way to fully functioning full-stack web apps. We also work with C#.net with the same process. You'll probably take at least 3 courses using C#.net for full-stack web development. You'll also learn the same process using the full stack of PHP development, and we end with the Laravel framework. So also in software development, there's a lot of JavaScript, and so we have classes that would teach you some of the popular frameworks there, so Angular and React, and using Node.js as your back end. And so all of these start to blend together when you get into the full stack. Some of our React apps work with C# or Java in the background. Now also, along the way, we include the basics of HTML, CSS, we work with databases such as MySQL, we work with jQuery and Bootstrap to do all the formatting. So the front end is pervasive throughout all of our stacks. And in the process, we don't just teach you how to code, we teach you how to develop software. And so we go through the entire software development process. So we will start with design, we talk about coding, of course, and then we do testing. And then there's also teamwork, so that way we get the idea of having milestones and sprints. And so the thing that you would learn here is pretty much how to be a software developer and step right into any company that is doing these things. So we've had good success with our students, getting good paying jobs at companies doing real work right from their graduation day and even before. So if you like what you saw here in the programming, come check us out at GCU and maybe you can have a new career just ahead of you.